They called themselves vampires, they drank blood, then they killed. The year was 1998. In the quiet, humid suburbs of Eustis, Florida, a darkness festered. It wasn't the usual teenage angst or rebellion. This was something far more sinister, born from fantasy role-playing and twisted into a deadly reality. At its center was a group of disaffected teenagers, led by a charismatic figure who claimed ancient powers. Rod Farrell, barely 16, believed he was a 500-year-old vampire. He wasn't just playing a game. He lived it, convincing his friends that he possessed the ability to transform them, to grant them eternal life and power, if only they pledged their loyalty and their blood to him. His cult, dubbed the Vampire Clan, wasn't large, but its grip on its members was absolute. They engaged in blood-drinking rituals, self-mutilation, and an escalating pattern of petty crimes, all fueled by a shared delusion that they were above mortal law, chosen for something greater. But the fantasy wasn't enough to satisfy Farrell's growing hunger for control and validation. His story would soon intertwine with the lives of Richard and Ruth Wendorf, a couple in Eustis whose daughter, Heather, had fallen under Farrell's spell. Heather Wendorf, 15 years old, felt stifled by her parents' strict rules. She was drawn to Farrell's rebellious charisma, his promise of freedom and belonging. She saw in him an escape, a way out of a life she perceived as suffocating. The cult's activities escalated from dark theatrics to outright violence. Minor break-ins and acts of vandalism became commonplace. The lines between their role-playing and reality blurred until they were almost indistinguishable. A chilling precedent was being set. The plan was simple, or so Farrell thought. Run away to New Orleans, a city he believed was teeming with others like him. But they needed money, and Heather suggested a source that would prove fatal: her parents' savings. On November 25, 1998, a group of Farrell's followers, including Heather, drove to the Wendorf home. What began as a plan for theft quickly devolved into something far more brutal, a senseless act of violence that would shock a nation. Farrell, fueled by rage and delusion, beat Richard Wendorf to death with a crowbar. Then he turned on Ruth Wendorf, killing her in the same horrific manner. The victims, innocent parents, were brutally murdered in their own home. After the murders, the group stole the Wendorf's Ford Explorer and fled. Their destination, New Orleans, but the blood they left behind and the sheer brutality of their actions ensured their freedom would be short-lived. The clock was ticking. News of the double homicide quickly spread, and investigators were baffled by the bizarre nature of the crime. Who would commit such a heinous act against a seemingly ordinary couple? The answer lay in the dark world of teenage cults. Heather Wendorf was initially considered a missing person, a runaway. But as the investigation deepened, her connection to Rod Farrell and his vampire clan became chillingly clear. Her role in the events that unfolded that night was complex and tragic. The group was apprehended just days later in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Their bizarre story, full of claims of vampirism and ancient bloodlines, began to unravel under the relentless questioning of law enforcement. Rod Farrell, despite his youth, was unrepentant. He continued to assert his vampiric identity, even claiming to have consumed some of Richard Wendorf's blood. His statements painted a terrifying picture of a young man completely detached from reality. The trial was a media sensation. The public struggled to comprehend how a group of teenagers could commit such unspeakable acts, driven by a fantasy so far removed from the mundane reality of their suburban lives. Farrell was ultimately convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and initially sentenced to death, becoming the youngest person on Florida's death row at the time. His age, however, became a crucial factor in subsequent appeals. His sentence was later commuted to life imprisonment without parole, a decision that sparked debate about the culpability of minors in such extreme crimes and the influence of cult dynamics on young, impressionable minds. The other members of the Vampire Clan also faced justice. Howard Scott Anderson, Charity Kesey, and Dana Cooper received varying sentences for their roles in the murders, ranging from life imprisonment to significant prison terms. Heather Wendorf, whose role was perhaps the most ambiguous, initially faced murder charges. She maintained she was unaware of Farrell's true intentions to kill her parents. Her testimony became a pivotal part of the subsequent legal proceedings. Eventually, Heather pleaded guilty to third-degree grand theft and was sentenced to probation, a stark contrast to the fate of her co-defendants. Her case highlighted the complex legal and psychological challenges of prosecuting minors involved in cult-related crimes. The vampire cult of Rod Ferrell remains a chilling testament to the dangers of unchecked fantasy, the seductive power of cult leaders, and the tragic consequences when impressionable youth cross the line from role-play into real-world violence. It serves as a stark reminder that sometimes the most profound horrors don't emerge from ancient evils, but from the dark corners of the human mind, particularly when young minds are manipulated and twisted by those who seek power. The Wendorf story and the lives destroyed by Ferrell's delusion echo a warning. The line between fantasy and reality, once blurred, can be impossible to discern, with devastating consequences. This wasn't just a tale of teenage rebellion. It was a deep dive into the psychology of cults, the allure of the forbidden, and the catastrophic impact of a delusion taken to its most extreme, violent conclusion. To understand the chilling allure of other cults that promised salvation but delivered destruction, explore our next investigation.